Well, good evening, folks, and thank you for coming. I know who and what we're competing with this evening, so that you're here is as much a testament to you and to your families as anything else I could say or this distinguished panel could say about you. So thank you so much. We're very pleased to have you. I'm State Rep Tom Calter. I want to just say a few words about how this event came about. I will then introduce our panelists by name and by their title, and then we will start back and we'll begin with District Attorney Cruz, who will give his remarks, and then we'll move right down the aisle, and then we will open it up for folks with questions. So let me tell you how we got here. When Patty and I were first married and had children, I was blessed to have 3 uncles who were priests, and 2 of them were combat chaplains. And one of them, Father Art, said to me, "Tom, let me give you some unsolicited advice about having children." He said, having children is a real challenge. He said their little minds are like a blank tape. Now that dates us all, doesn't it? Kids would know what we're talking about. And the tape is completely white and uncluttered and pure. But from the moment that child is born, you're in a race with society to fill in all the spaces. And that by the time the child becomes an adult, and this was 25, 30 years ago, today it's perhaps by the time the child is 10, that tape will be filled with stuff. And it's either going to be the stuff that society wants to feed up to that child, not very good stuff. And he gave me countless examples, and you know what they are. The stuff that deteriorates and contaminates the mind. Or you can fill it up with good information and core values, and the stuff that makes for good young men and women. And so the race was on. And we had our 3 children, and we worked on all that stuff to fill up the white tape, knowing that we were in a race against society. A society that seems so motivated to fill that tape up faster than us. And so, in my last 7 years as your representative, I've heard from so many people. And the rate that I've heard from them on this issue of drugs has accelerated to a level that is alarming. I'm hearing from parents about their children. Quite honestly, I'm hearing from some children about their parents. We're hearing stories of great tragedy. We're getting inquiries about treatment centers and services and payment options. It's become, for Betty and I, one of the top 2 or 3 issues that we face every day. Where in my first year in the district, I may have had 1 case. Now there's several per month. So we need to deal with it. And we need to deal with it very quickly. I hear from the law enforcement people in my district and get briefings from my 6 chiefs almost every month about what's going on in their communities. I hear from my own 3 children. One of them a police officer on the panel. One of them a Boston EMS medic. And my daughter, who works at South Shore Hospital. And we hear tragic stories. I hear tragic stories from them about families affected by drugs, about tragedies and crises. And finally, I had the good fortune to meet a new friend 2 years ago, Mr. Tom Calter, who's on our panel, who shared with me the tragic story of his daughter's untimely death from a heroin overdose. Tom's going to share with you his story. And so I knew that we needed a forum in which we could talk about not only the problem, but most importantly, the solutions and what we can do to combat it. I'll close by saying to you, I've met drug dealers, and I've met people that would love to sell drugs to you and to your children. They need to operate in an environment of ignorance. They need to operate in darkness in order for them to be effective. So when we have forums like this, We bring light to the issue. We share information. We give you, people who care, the tools you need to beat them at their own game. So that's why we're here. Again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you on behalf of their children for loving them so much that you're willing to take on this fight. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel very quickly. First, we have Plymouth District Attorney Tim Cruz. Next, Mylene, and I asked Mylene how to pronounce her last name. It sounds like Krenowski. She said, just call me Madonna. Next to Mylene is Danny Lynch, Officer Dana Smith from Plympton, Detective Sergeant Bobby Wells, Patrolman Ryan Calter from Kingston, both of them, Tom Audette from Plymouth, Rich Murillo from the Independence Academy, and Robert Gallagher, also from the Independence Academy. In your handout, it describes a bit about what they do, and I'll speak to it as I introduce each of them individually. So first, let me begin the program by the people that really have the information you need so that you've got the tools to combat this issue. First, as I said, is Plymouth County District Attorney Tim Cruz. Tim's got 2 sons of his own. Tim is a real professional. He's a Plymouth County District Attorney. He's been District Attorney, I believe, for 4 terms now. Is that correct?
12 years.
12 years. Thank you. I get to work with Tim quite often on issues that are not very pleasant, and he brings a sense of intrigue, and that he understands what goes on in the criminal element before they know what goes on in the criminal element. What I'm most excited about with Tim is he brings issues right to the schools, whether it's drugs, whether it's intruders, whether it's bullying, whether it's cyber bullying. He's out in front of the issue, so it's my great pleasure. It's a great honor, Tim, to have you here today to speak to this group. Tim Cruz.
Thank you very much, Tom. It is great to be here, and I also want to thank you and everyone that put this panel together, because it really is an important issue that I think we all have to deal with in our community, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers. Just living in this community, we need to make sure that we're aware of the situations that we currently find ourselves and where our kids currently find themselves too. And the issues that we deal with and what I do, and the major role that substance abuse deals with in the criminal law. Now, in what I do, I'm a prosecutor, and that means that we put, in a nutshell, people who break the law, we hold them accountable. But what we also do, and what we've been doing for the last 12 years, is also trying to come up with expanding our traditional role to get more involved in the schools, to get more involved with our kids, whether it be our annual drug education camp that we do every year for free for kids here in the county, or whether it be coming to the schools, and I've spoken in this room before regarding internet safety and cyberbullying to parents and to children, whether it's dealing with social host programs that we're dealing with parents who, unfortunately, during prom season are providing alcohol to their kids, thinking that nothing bad could ever happen to that, and they're going to control the situation and take kids' car keys away. Dealing with our diversion programs for kids that make the first issue, the first problem that they make, so they don't get into a situation where they're going to have a criminal record. Making sure that they can do some community service, making sure we can keep them out of trouble. But we also deal with the young kids, obviously, who get caught with a 6-pack of beer. And we divert those kids and give them education. But we also deal with some real bad people. People who are out there that are dealing drugs and they're dealing things into our community, hurting our kids, and they're doing it for the simple reason of making money. And they don't care the effects of these dangerous drugs, the poison they are peddling, and these are the people that need to be removed from the streets. But we also need to make sure that our approach with kids is different. And our goal is to make sure that the kids that we're dealing with today don't become part of the criminal justice system later on. When I was a young prosecutor almost 30 years ago now, I can't believe it's been that long, I think of the problems that we had back then when we were dealing with heroin. Heroin was a terrible problem back then. And the purity of heroin back in 1985, 1986 was probably 18 to 20% pure. The heroin on the street today is closer to 90%, 95% pure. It's $3 a bag and get a bundle of 10 for $25. It is incredibly cheap money-wise. And what we've been seeing, unfortunately, is young kids who get hooked on prescription meds, usually Oxy, some form of opiates. Then they take that and they figure out they can't afford it anymore. OxyContin is very expensive. $80 milligram tablet, $80. Probably a pharmaceutical company costs them $4 to make it. Incredible markup. Kids end up going from oxys. They end up will take off the seal off of it. They'll crush it up, and instead of taking a relaxed amount of drug that you should be taking for a disease that you may have over a controlled time, you're getting all that into your system at once. Since our decriminalization of marijuana here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 2008, and I don't know if it's coincidence or not, we have seen our fatal opiate overdoses rise every year but one in Plymouth County. And it's not just our county. It's across the state. And last year alone, we had 27 fatal opiate overdoses in Plymouth County. Up to a month ago, we had 29 this year. And we've got a couple months left to go. Every day, my phone will go off regarding unattended deaths, these terrible tragedies that are happening out there, kids that are out there that are taking these drugs. And we need to make sure that we get the education and get the parental involvement of our kids and help them while we can. Prescription meds are out there. We need to make sure every town now, virtually every town in Plymouth County right now, 22 out of 27, myself and Sheriff McDonald just kicked off last week prescription medical boxes in every police station in their foyer. All you got to do is walk in there with your expired, your unwanted, your unused prescription meds. Don't flush them. Make sure that they'll hurt the environment. Put them in those bins in your police departments. They will be disposed of by Command to Energy. And the good thing is, when they destroy them, they can actually create energy out of it. It's a good thing to get those off the street because they are such a markup. And it may not be you or your kids. Lots of times, if you have a grandparent living at your home, what you're going to very well end up with sometimes are kids going into your medicine cabinets and maybe taking somebody else's medication. Their friends taking it. You can't watch everybody. So when those medications are done, get rid of them. You know, one other thing I was asked to talk about briefly tonight is social host liability. And every year in many towns in our community, I go to schools and talk about the issues of social host liability of parents who choose to have parties for their kids during prom season. And the number of parents that say to me, oh, you know, we're going to have a party at our house. Yeah, the kids are all 17 or 18, but they're going to college next year. They're going to have to learn to drink then, and I'm taking all their keys. Well, beyond the fact that that's just plain wrong, it's also criminal, and it's also potentially civil. Because if you provide alcohol or furnish alcohol to somebody at your house, a kid under the age of 21, and you've taken their keys, now let's face it, our kids are usually smarter than us. They're going to probably give you another set of keys, not the keys that they have for their car that's parked down the road. And all too often I see the tragic end of a young kid drinking alcohol, driving down the road, and hurting or killing somebody. And I often think of a young girl who went to Bridgewater State a few years ago, 18-year-old kid, drank way too much, was driving in front of a little store, probably 1 o'clock in the morning, hit 3 other Bridgewater State students, killing one. And I'll never forget the day that young girl went to court and she pled guilty. She went to jail because it was minimum mandatory jail sentence for OUI, negligent motor vehicle homicide. And she was standing in that courtroom crying her eyes out. And honestly saying, I wish it was me. I know I believe her. I really do believe she wished it was her. But we can't change that. She was crying. Her family was crying. Everyone was upset. The victim's family were there. Everybody was upset. The only constant thing in that courtroom, everybody loses. Nobody wins. So we have to make sure that we do our job as parents and that we do our jobs making sure we don't provide alcohol to our kids, making sure we don't have access to drugs, being parents and staying on top of our kids. It's time for us, when I talk to parents many times, what I say is what another firm that comes to me to some of these things talks about, be a parent, not a pal. I want to be friends with my kids too, probably when they're 25. Up until that point, I'm going to be their dad, and we're going to have a little discussion regarding many things that go on in my house and the things that go around our community. So having said that, I think my time's up. I appreciate you listening tonight, and I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Mr. Attorney Cruz, your passion is always contagious, and I appreciate those comments. Every one of our speakers have brought materials that give instructions and instructive guidance on many of the things they're talking about. So there's a lot of material. Please pick it up before you go. And also, the remarks are going to take about an hour, and then we're getting right into Q&A. So if there's questions you'd like to ask, just reach out and sure we'll be available. Our next two speakers both work for, first of all, Mylene Kuzanowski, Executive Vice President of Regional Advancement, Caron Treatment Centers, and her colleague Jenny Lynch, Regional Vice President of Caron Treatment Centers in Boston. Caron is considered a leader in the adolescent treatment industry, providing personalized treatment approaches to deal with each patient's individual needs. Caron recognizes the importance of working collaboratively with schools in providing prevention, education, and early intervention as a critical element in reducing the devastating effects of substance abuse and dependency among youth. We're happy to have you, Eileen and Jane.
Thank you, and I'm really delighted to be here and congratulate all of you in the audience for coming out this evening. I think that speaks to your community and also for the folks who put this panel together. I think it's very important. I've been working in the addiction field since 1985, and unfortunately, my son grew up with me in this field, so I also have a grown son who's come out the other side. And I think that one of the most important things as parents that we need to remember is that you really have the biggest influence on your child's life, and much more than you think you do. And I had read the research on that throughout my career and have done a lot of these types of programs, but it was really very refreshing for me to hear from my son as a 28-year-old, for him to say to me, every time I went out and you said, I don't want you to smoke or drink, and I went through this kind of litany of what he needed not to do, that made a difference. And so to have lived that and have gotten through the teenage years and the college years, and knowing that even though you're having those hard conversations, it's real important to do that and to be the parent and not the friend. And so I would really like for you to hopefully leave here today knowing and that if you think that there's something that's not right with your child, you need to trust that judgment as well. You know your child better than anyone else, and to be open to the fact that good kids make poor choices, and those poor choices can have a devastating effect on the rest of their life. And so it's really important to start the conversation early and consistently, and part of that is having the correct information. For us, those of us in the field, it's very hard to stay even current with what's kind of the latest flavor of the month, because just as soon as we feel that we're on top of something or can address an issue from a preventative standpoint, kids or dealers have found a better way to kind of go around adults. So it's very challenging for even those of us in the field to stay on top of it. And hopefully we can provide you with some information as it relates to the what's current and what the trends are. At Caron, we oftentimes see the devastating effects of substance abuse and how that impacts a family. And really it knows no boundaries in regards to whose life it affects. It doesn't matter how smart you are or where you come from, and that to be open to the fact that any family can experience that issue is really important. I think that you're going to hear a lot of information tonight that can be scary, but there also is some good news that in terms of trends. And again, the use of substances and seeing them come into a community, rise, and then decline. In my experience since 1985 in this field, you've seen these trends change, and you can really predict some things that are going to happen. Overall, the prevalence of alcohol use and binge drinking is on the decline, and that's, I think, because there's been a very concerted effort overall. However, that being said, every kid that comes into treatment, and I don't know that we ever have any kid who hasn't used alcohol, and that still is a drug of choice. It's easily accessible. It is oftentimes socially acceptable as well, and that this thought of it's a rite of passage is a misnomer. So it's really important to stay on top of the issues or the substances that aren't illicit and more socially acceptable because they are just as devastating. What we know is that the younger a child is when they first begin using, the more likely they are to have a substance abuse diagnosis sometime in their life, and that addiction progresses much more rapidly with an adolescent than it does with an adult. For an adult, that might take several years or maybe even several decades for someone to need treatment. For an adolescent, that can happen extremely rapidly because their brains are not yet developed. So it's important to take any use as something very serious and significant. Smoking rates have declined also over the past number of years pretty steadily. And other substances have shown a decline. Again, as we get the information out to parents and schools and what to look for, and there are specific prevention efforts, we do see a decline in that. Excuse me. In terms of what we do see as the areas of concern, that smokeless tobacco and hookahs and cigars are on the rise, and we see that in many, many communities. And again, to not have a lackadaisical attitude about tobacco or alcohol, thinking, well, it's really not that bad, they're not using heroin or they're not raiding the prescription drugs in my medicine cabinet. Again, knowing that any substance that a child uses that changes their brain chemistry really places them at risk. We also know that marijuana has continued to be a significant issue, and there are some challenges, and I think you're going to hear some further information related to marijuana use and the fact that along with heroin being much more potent than it was a number of years ago, the people who are growing marijuana have become much more sophisticated, and so the THC levels is also far more concentrated and sophisticated. So marijuana continues to be a big issue. We had seen a downward trend in ecstasy or club drugs, and we're now seeing an upward trend in that. And one of the things that happens with ecstasy as well as prescription drugs is this perception, as well as for marijuana, a perception that they're safe. And so a young person sees a pill, they don't know that it's being manufactured in some clandestine lab, and they think it's safe. It's also easy to hide. So it's in your pocket. It's much easier to hide, and we've seen a lot of tragedies around Molly lately. And I'm not sure if you've seen them in your community here, but there's certainly an upward trend. And then a number of drugs, again, come in and out of communities, such as opiates and then the progression to heroin. That is really scary, and that thinking that if my kid is just smoking pot, that's not an issue. I know that one family I worked with, both parents had PhDs. They were brilliant. The young man was a talented athlete. He was a talented musician. He was at the top of his class and functioning very, very well. And his parents caught him smoking pot a couple of times, didn't think it was a big deal, and they had no idea that he was driving into Center City, Philadelphia, to buy his heroin and coming in the middle of the night and coming home until his dad found the heroin and everything that goes with that. So it's really important to be vigilant. I was also asked to talk a little bit about household products, and that the use of inhalants is a really big issue, particularly for middle school kids. And the issue around inhalants is the fact that they're found all around our homes. We have them everywhere. So they're solvents, gasoline, the computer sprays. If you think, and kids think that all of those kind of substances are very, very safe. If you look at even magic markers, when a teacher will pass out magic markers, and they make them so they smell nice now. The first thing kids do is they smell those. And what the danger is around inhalants is the fact that that's really treated as a poison control issue, and because that can be lethal the first time someone uses it. And the devastating consequences of inhalant abuse in terms of, again, that brain chemistry and what that does to a child is pretty significant. I know I worked with a young girl. She was in the middle school, and she was so severely involved with inhalants that she was pouring gasoline over herself. And then pretty disturbing things can happen as a result of that. And so we need to be extremely, extremely vigilant. And then one other area that has that we've seen an increase in, and that's the use of study enhancement drugs. So the use of Adderall for students who feel a great pressure academically. We have seen an increase where there is that academic pressure to perform, to be the top of the class, to be to score high on SATs, to get into the college that they want to. That pressure, we have seen a great deal of that particular substance. And I guess that I would say, I think probably I'm coming close to end, that it's really important as parents that we learn as much as we can, that we have the conversations early and often with our kids. And I would hope that you go home this evening and have a conversation with your child or your children, and that if you do need some help and are struggling with that you reach out for help, because there are plenty of resources to intervene early.
Thank you so much, Mylene. And Danny, before we move on to you, the point I want to make, and you're going to see it in the literature as you pick up before you leave this evening, and Mylene addressed it a couple of times, but I want to address it a few more times. The addictive nature of things we think are benign. Remember, if a child is exposed to something that can be addictive, the acceleration rate of them getting addicted is so much faster than in a grown man or woman. So it's so important that the things we see around our household, or that they may be doing, that say, it's only pot, whatever. It's got an addictive nature. And Tim often calls it the gateway drug, marijuana. And it is. Before we move on to Dan, I want to thank Superintendent Tuffy for hosting us here this evening. Thank you, John. I also want to welcome my friend, Superintendent D.A.R.E from Plymouth, for joining us this evening. The President of Jordan Hospital, Peter. Thank you for joining us. Danny, all yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I only have 5 minutes, and I could spend 5 hours talking about this stuff. In addition to being a regional vice president of Caron Treatment Centers, we have a regional office in Norwell, Mass. And Mylene still gets a kick out of my accent. I am from South Boston, and her being from, she being from Pennsylvania, we just joked with each other for the last couple of days. In any event, in addition to that, I'm a certified addiction specialist, a licensed alcohol and drug counselor with the Commonwealth of Mass, and a board-registered interventionist. I come here as a parent, a professional, and a man in recovery. I've been a sober man for coming up on 30 years, a day at a time, on December 6th. And I say that to you because I feel as though I'm in a place now where I'm a voice for recovery. I know that treatment works, and I know that recovery works if you work it. So with that said, why I'm here tonight, I'm here to talk about some of the warning signs and some of the parental blinders that we sometimes carry with us as parents. And I being one of a 17 and an 18-year-old, 2 boys, even with my experience as a recovering man and working in the field for 27 years, I too can be misleading, misled, or, because teenagers are crafty. Addicts are crafty. And we get very good at concealing and hiding and doing the things that we do so we can continue to get high. And there's a booklet out there. I want you to all, it's outside there, the Caron Center put out. It's a parent's guide for the prevention of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. Now, I just want to read a couple of things on here that pertain to what I'm supposed to talk about. And it says here, it can be difficult to tell if your child is using alcohol or drugs because some of the signs, such as changes in mood or unusual temper outbursts, are common in some teens. You know what is typical behavior for your child. If you have a concern or think that may be a problem, seek the help of a substance abuse counselor or a medical doctor. And some of those signs are, with academic performance, slipping grades, absent often, changes in attitude towards teachers, changes in motivation to perform, and then the behavioral changes in friends, avoiding old friends, sudden concern of privacy, locking doors, lack of interest in parents, withdrawal, isolation, fatigue, depression, anxiety, lying, giddiness, lack of cooperation, defy rules, difficult to talk to, increased need for money, gets home late, avoids interaction. It's not mine. It belongs to a friend. Interest in pro-drug music, literature, and some legal problems. And then the physical changes, bloodshot eyes, dilated pupils, clenching of teeth, weight loss or gain, bruises, runny noses, eyes, spurts of snack for food hunger, forgetful, dazed look, sleeping more or less than usual. Then, of course, the physical evidence, mouthwash, gum, chewing, burning insects, lighters, rolling papers, pipes, things of that nature. So there's a great book out there, and it's very detailed on, allowing you as a guide to some of the things that you may be concerned about. And the other thing I wanted to talk about quickly is the blinders that we sometimes have on as parents. And I'm guilty of that, having two teenage boys. And I once said to a friend of mine who works in the adolescent addiction field, I says, I have some drug kits for my office. I'm going home to drug test my kids. Or at least I'm going to put it on the counter just to let them know that I have them ready. And he said, Danny, now you have to go home and test those kids. I said, why? I said, I get it. I know what's going on. He said, no, you don't. You're the parent. You don't know anything. And so, I thought about that, and I went home, and I went to test one of my boys, and he said, well, Dad, before you do, something I need to tell you. I tried marijuana. And I was like, what? I was broke. I was just shocked. And then, a few months, 11 months went by, and, I started to see a change in some of the things I just talked about. And, as a parent, you need to go with your gut. Don't second guess. Don't be a friend, as you heard here tonight. Be the parent. And one of the things that, if you're feeling like there's something going on, drug test. You can get drug test kits at Walgreens, Stop and Shop. It's in this book. And the other thing I found was a good way to find out what's really going on in your child's world is social media. Get on their Facebook. I'm sure everyone here buys a phone for their child. Monitor their phone. Monitor their texting. Monitor their Facebook page, their iTouch, whatever kind of tool they're using for social media. You'll be amazed what these kids are young. They don't know what they're doing on the internet. They're exposing themselves like, it's incredible. And that's how I was able to find certain things out. So with that said, I just, again, want to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. That was very instructive. Just before I move forward, I want to welcome my dear friend, Representative Amelia, for joining us today. And she's welcome. Our next speaker was Dave Smith, the Plympton police officer and D.A.R.E officer. I can tell you that with my own children, D.A.R.E officers in Kingston, someone here today is Tom Calter, played a major role in my family. For those of you that don't know, D.A.R.E stands for Drug and Alcohol Resistance Education. Dana, welcome.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, folks, for coming. First, I want to thank the actual staff at the Dennett Elementary School where I teach. We have a very gifted staff there and very supportive of this program. They actually fought to bring this back, and I am privileged to be in those classrooms with those kids. What D.A.R.E tries to do, just as Representative Calter just said, it's drug abuse resistance education. We also delve into coping strategies and strategies that actually help the kids deal with situations, whether it be peer pressure, any type of substance abuse. And what's a key to that is instead of just lecturing to the kids and me standing there and telling them that all drugs are bad and alcohol is bad, we do discuss in those classes alcohol, we talk about marijuana, we talk about other drugs. We also get into an element about prescription drug abuse as well, and over-the-counter drugs. The main crux of what we do, though, as far as the D.A.R.E program, we try to have the kids be interactive. And one of the ways that we do that is when you go into that classroom, one of the first things you do usually is the kids are always asking, well, what's on that on your belt? And, you know, all the different questions. Well, when was the last time you had an arrest? Or any of those normal questions. But once you get beyond that, and the kids are very familiar with me, having been there for a few years now, you actually get the kids respect. They start to actually ask some questions. And when I teach the class, once again, it's not a lecture style format. It's more interactive. What I do is I get the kids, I ask them questions. When we start talking about topics, I use higher learning questions, basic ones. How, why, when, where, what. To get them involved, to get them to be part of that classroom. Will I get every single kid to get involved? No. But to get those kids to actually ask questions and start to stand up for themselves, get a little more confidence, that's a huge first step. As far as peer pressure goes...
Dana, if I may,
yes,
the age
sir.
of those kids that you work with.
Basically, I have the kindergarten class. I do one class with them, and that's usually more safety involved. I have two classes, the first and third grades, that I do 4 classes with, again, more safety, but we do go into a little bit of the drug message. And then 5th and 6th grade is more involving more of the heavier drug message and so forth. But also, being back-to-back, those kids don't do the same lesson twice. In the 5th grade, they do a separate lesson when they go into the 6th grade. In the 5th grade, they get a little bit more of the explanation on as far as the drugs and alcohol on the specifics. They don't get necessarily a reiteration when they come into 6th grade. We work more on role-playing and interactive skills where they're working with their peers. So we'll give them scenarios and have them work through it, and we actually give them the strategies, which we use that same acronym of D.A.R.E for define, assess, respond, and evaluate. We also use another one in the 6th grade, which is called REAL, which is refuse, explain, avoid, and leave. Those skills are taught to them where they can actually work through them in class. So they're not just being told, hey, don't do this. They're actually working through a situation. You were at a party. This was presented to you. How are you going to handle that? And then we discuss it as a class, and their peers actually come up with some of the reasons why they did it, and then we'll evaluate it at the end and say, hey, do you think that's a better thing we could have done? Do you think there was another option for that? We'll get another kid to talk about it, and they may have another solution to the problem. I'll kind of guide the conversation, and obviously I will have my input as well, but I also take that part of it and use the consequences the kids already know from school. When they have those, we also talk about legal consequences, how it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives by doing things beyond just even the health effects of what they do. As was mentioned earlier, we talked about prescription drug abuse and over-the-counter drug abuse. I do a 2-class lesson on that in the 5th grade, and then we also do a parental coffee hour, which I get people like yourselves that are going to be interactive as well to come in before I present it to the kids. That way it gives the parents a little bit of an idea about what we're going to be talking about and discussing, but it also gets the parents involved. One of the great things about D.A.R.E is it gets the kids talking. One of the situations that actually did come up because of what was being discussed in class was about marijuana. And I actually had a student who actually mentioned, well, I heard that you could use marijuana for medicine. So now you have that little blurred line of saying, well, it's a medicine, is it okay? And as was discussed by the Caron people to my left, sometimes kids will get confused because they see it as being something safe. They know drugs or medicines that are safe, their parents give them to them, and when we talk about that, we also explain in the sense of where they're getting those drugs, how they're getting those drugs, how they're administered. They're done by a physician. So to go back to the marijuana, the best way I could answer it at that time, being posed on the floor, so to speak, was I referred them to a cancer patient being treated with radiation. You know that radiation can actually kill you. So when you start looking at those things and saying, okay, well, radiation can kill you, marijuana has serious consequences beyond the legal consequences, but health consequences as well, as we discussed in class. Using it under a doctor's prescription, it is medicinal, but yes, it's a doctor who's actually prescribing it to you. You have to understand, and as I speak to the kids, they have to understand that it is medicine being administered to them by a professional who knows exactly what they're doing. So those are the type of discussions that will come up. Will I say that happens every single day? No. But it does come up. By having those conversations, we can work through it. When we come to the end of the year, the culmination for the 5th grade is they write an essay. Their basic essay is designed to show what they've learned as an individual. For the 6th grade component, since they already have graduated through the 5th grade, when they go to the 6th grade, they do a video project. What I focus on that, having had them for the 2nd year in D.A.R.E. at that point, is that they work with their peers and they produce basically a PSA that is a video just explaining how some kids actually get presented with a drug abuse situation, how they handle it, how they actually break it down, and we go back through the whole thing. Last year was the first year we did it. It came out absolutely astounding. I was actually very surprised. We have some very gifted teachers at the school, Sean Avery being one of them, very gifted as far as his video abilities. But the kids produced it. The kids worked through it. And every time they had to practice and think about what they were going to say, they were thinking about these issues we were all talking about up here at the table. I'd like to close by saying, as far as D.A.R.E. and how it is going to help parents, and as far as communication goes, when it's in the schools, one of the last things I say with the kids before I leave to go to the next classroom is, please go home and talk to your parents about what we talk about in school. I leave it as an open door policy. They know the parents in the community know they can get in touch with me through the police station. At the beginning of the year, I give all the kids my business card, so I try to be as accessible as possible, but I also want the kids to know that the community as a whole are accessible as possible. And once again, thank you for having me tonight.
We're so very grateful for all you do. I mean that sincerely. I'll tell you a very short story about D.A.R.E. officers and my pride in the Kingston D.A.R.E. officers. Now, I have the Representative 6 times, so I got to obey it. One of my sons wrote to a D.A.R.E. officer when he was 10 years old. And he addressed it to the Kingston PD. And he said, hey, you're doing a good job. I think I want to be a cop, and I want to be just like you. So that brings us to our next speaker. The older guy is Detective Bobby Wells, who my son Ryan Calter wrote to. So today's your cop, and they're going to address you now. Bobby and Ryan. Children are old Bobbies.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because there's certain things that Ryan does when he works with me at nighttime, and I'm like, Ryan, I'm like your father's age. Will you want your father out here doing this stuff at nighttime? Give me a break, will you?
And if I may, I missed the best part. When Ryan graduated from the police academy, Bobby came over to the house and he gave the letter back in a frame.
You know, today I had a few things I wanted to talk about, and some of the things have already been spoken about. But today I was driving down the road, just kind of half paying attention to the radio, and I happened to hear they did a poll. I think it was done by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, so I'm not sure if it was 70% or 77%, but it said that 70% of high school students that they polled weren't drinking. And I thought that was pretty good. I was like, wow, that's pretty good, compared to like when I went to high school back in those days. And then as I was listening up here tonight, I just started thinking to myself, it really isn't as good as I once thought it was, because if you think about it, that means 3 out of 10 kids in school are drinking. And I remember years ago, telling parents years ago that, hey, you know what, it's just part of growing up. The kids are going to do this, the kids are going to do that. And that, I will never give that advice again. And it was a lot younger when I used to give that kind of advice. And I've learned that because people maybe in my generation did those things, doesn't make it right to say, to buy into that philosophy that that's part of growing up, they're going to do that. You have to have, now that we have this opiate epidemic you've heard so much about, and some of you might not even know what that means. And it's an opiate. Opiate drugs are those that are derived either naturally or synthetically from the opiate plant, opium. Some are legal, like Oxycontin and morphine and hydrocodone, and some of it isn't legal, like heroin. And what some of the guests have spoken about earlier today is that this is an extremely, extremely addictive drug. That these kids that try this, there was no way when they first, took a pill that they ever thought they were going to become addicted to it. And I'm down to court 3 or 4 days a week, a minimum. And I see kids that I know from going to this school and other schools that I'm familiar with that were great athletes, that were very talented people. I see grown adults that I know down there on a regular basis that certainly didn't mean to get addicted to this, but they did, and that's because it's so addicting. I see parents coming into the court and talking to the judge, begging the judge to please commit my son, have a psychologist on my daughter, have somebody talk to them to keep them alive. And like some of the people were saying earlier, we have some of these drugs right in our house and don't even know it. And that's what a lot of these drugs were made for cancer and for pain and addiction and stuff like that. And I don't know, the thing I wanted to really stress more than anything, and I've heard some of the other speakers talk about you're a parent, not a friend. And obviously, I don't want to preach to the choir. You're here for a particular reason. You're here because you care about your kids. It's the people that aren't here that we want to be talking to. But you can't, prevention is the number one thing. You can't think that, they're going to experiment because that's what's going to get them killed, unfortunately.
Thank you, Bobby. Next speaker, Ryan.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm extremely honored and privileged to be on this board right now, surrounded by such an incredible amount of experience, training, education. It's dumbfounding to me, and looking across at you people is it makes me hopeful. It makes me hopeful for the future, and it's really impressive that you're out here tonight, and so I'm honored to be in your presence as well. The thing is about drug use and then abuse and then quite possibly addiction is that it doesn't know any geographical boundaries. Detective Sergeant Wells just spoke to you about the fact that you may experiment, and now there's a different way of thinking about that he'll never give that advice again. Detective Sergeant Wells just told you about an opiate problem in this region. He even went so far as to say that maybe the primary audience we're trying to reach tonight may not be in attendance. But I can tell you this for certain. Please don't think for 1 second that you can't be a victim of drug abuse and addiction because you're an incredible parent and you're sitting here tonight. Please don't believe that, because you can. You absolutely can. I wondered why I was asked to be on this panel, surrounded by such an incredible amount of knowledge, education, and experience. I've been a Kingston police officer for 4.5 years. I've had the opportunity to do some narcotics work, and so I wondered if maybe that was the reason. But the truth is, the reason I'm here is because I see it firsthand. I'm the kid that pulls over your child. I'm the guy that comes to your house. I'm the guy that finds marijuana in your children's cars and tows it and calls you. I'm that guy. So now we have a myriad of experience up here. People from all areas of education and walks of life. I'm here to tell you that what they are telling you in no uncertain terms does, will, and can happen to you. So if I'm speaking to this audience, I have to understand that I'm probably speaking to, by way of hands, middle school parents, high school parents, both? Okay. I think the fundamental difference between drug use at the middle school level and drug use at the high school level is that drug use at the middle school level is most likely going to be opportunity use. So what do you have in your house that they can use? Inhalants, the medicine cabinet. You know, those things are what your middle schoolers are going to go after first, if they're going to experiment. That's what we're trying to combat here tonight, and that's why you're here, and that's why you're listening to us. Hopefully we can stop that before it happens. High schoolers, on the other hand, are a very different breed. They have the opportunity by means of a car. They have the opportunity by means of maybe a job in which they have money, in which they can purchase these things on the street that middle schoolers don't. And by the way, that car that they're driving around that's probably registered to you, take a look through it before I do. Because you're going to go into that car, by the way, your car, and you might smell something. You might see something. You might check the center console. You might check the glove compartment, the back of the seats. And if you find something, have that conversation with your child. And do it often. Search that car often. That's where you're going to find things. You might find a pipe. You might find cigarettes, especially if they're under 18. You might find a small bundle in the back seat of a piece of paper that you have no idea what it is. Don't discard it. Open it up. Take a look at it. You might find a baggie with a little piece of corner that's torn off. Get on Google. Figure out what that's for. Middle school parents, as well as high school parents. This has already been mentioned, but it's so important. Know what's going on in social media with your kids. If they're blocking you on their Facebook page, that's a problem. Get around it. You need to get around that. Find somebody, another parent, who might be friends with them or their child is friends with them. Get creative. Figure out a way to figure out what's going on there. And same thing with their Twitter accounts. And God only knows what other social media they're using. But get creative and get to know what's going on there. You know, D.A.R.E. Cruz he made a great point, and I think it was echoed again, to be a parent, not a pal. And I thought that was tremendous. And it's a great education for me, having a 3.5-year-old and a 5-month-old now. And one thing I wanted to say off of that point was an interesting fact. Your kids are going to find themselves in situations that they didn't anticipate happening, that they have no idea how to find their way out of. And I heard one story on a substance abuse awareness program that I was privileged to be in attendance, that a certain father had a code word with his daughter, that he'd call her all the time when she knew she was out, and if that code word was spoken, she was picked up, got out of that situation, no questions asked. A tactic used by my mother, by the way, as well, with me. The other thing was, speaking of my parents, we need to be strong, we need to get involved, we need to be present, we need to be accountable. I never came home when my mother wasn't standing at the door to greet me. Didn't really care what I was saying, but she was smelling me up and down and wondering where I was, what was going on, asking me a ton of questions. And I thought about that before I got home, because I knew she was going to be there every single night. And I thank you for that. So I'll close with this. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're here tonight, watching at home, not in attendance. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It does not matter your zip code. Drug use, abuse, and addiction is an epidemic in this community. We need to combat that. It starts with us. It continues with you. And I think as a team, we could potentially save someone's life. So thank you for coming tonight. We all appreciate it.
Secretary Wells, thank you so much for your remarks and for your leadership in this community. And Ryan, two things. A, I'm very proud of you. And B, you should know that Mom is up waiting for me when I get home. Believe it or not, we're building houses together. Our kids are all living with us now. Imagine that. The next speaker, Tom my dad, I'm sorry, Tom, has become a friend. And he's become an inspiration for me. I met Tom through a friend, and Tom and Michelle shared their story of their mother daughter's untimely death at the hands of heroin. And so today I'm proud to introduce to you and honored to hear your remarks.
I need to stand. I hope nobody minds. So I'm here tonight. I lost my daughter. My wife is here with me. Excuse me, my wife Michelle. We lost our daughter April 6, 2008. Let me first tell you a little bit about who Jillian was so you understand the child that I'm talking about. As a child, Jillian was that funny, always laughing, kind of clumsy kid. Everything with her was funny. Doing homework was funny. Going to the dentist was funny. She found a reason to laugh no matter what it was. She was a happy kid, fun kid, normal activities, softball, soccer, playing with her friends, arts and crafts, these kinds of things, just like any normal kid is today. As she got older into her teenage years, that did not change. She was that same kid, took a little longer to do her homework, still laughed, still tried to do anything that would make others laugh. Very generous kid. When it came time for birthdays, holidays, Christmas time, she enjoyed the whole idea of the presents, the giving piece, just as much as the receiving piece. She really went over the top when it came to surprising people with presents. As she got a little older and working and making money, she actually bought bigger presents. I remember her buying me a nice gas grill to put out by the pool in the backyard. Spent a lot of money. She had worked for it. This was something she was proud of and liked to do. She was a very giving kid. Until the time she turned 21, when through the high school years, we really did not have a lot of issues with her. We could count the incidents on one hand. Don't get me wrong, she was not a perfect kid. She got grounded for, staying out too late or, not calling when she was supposed to, but she was a good kid. We did not have any struggles with her as a teenager. When she turned 21, got into the nightlife, was able to drink now legally, go out, hang out with friends. Her responsibility continued, but she definitely liked being outside and being with friends. If we told her she needed to check in, she would. She knew if she was out and she was drinking, not to drive. Somebody else would drive. She would call from the house and check in with us. Very responsible. She spent a brief time moving in with some friends, recognized the problem there that we found out about, had to go over and get her and bring her home to get away from that influence and bring her back to the home. Again, good kid. Jillian wanted to go into cosmetology. She had a dream one day of opening up a business, hair salon / cosmetology, doing makeup and that kind of thing. She worked at Supercuts for a while. She also worked at a family restaurant in Plymouth, hostessing, waitressing, bartending as well. Her story changed when she was 22. She met an older friend, boyfriend that she really liked. We met him, nice enough guy, no red flags. Everything seemed to be okay. Again, she liked to be out and have fun. So we met him, things seemed normal. Over time, she developed a more serious relationship with him to the point where she wanted to move out and move in with this friend. We were a little concerned with that because Jillian, although she's now 22, almost 23, she was still a young 22, 23. And what I mean by that is she was naive. She was still a child, and however, she was an adult, but she still acted like a kid. Very playful, very impressionable in my mind. So I had a talk with this young man like any father would in a situation like this where he was a lot older than she was. A lot to me, that 7-year gap was a lot. So I had a talk with him and explained Jillian's vulnerability and, trusted that he would be looking out for her. So at 23, at this time now, she moved out of the house and moved in with him. We saw a lot less of her at that point, obviously, because now she's older and she's an adult. We felt proud that we got through those hard teenage years, the driving, that experience, and we felt we built a good foundation we could trust that she was going to make the right decisions with her life. She had a younger brother, 10 years younger than her, always great with him, would come by, take him out for the day, always come back with presents and gifts and so forth, and her brother loved when she used to come over to the house. Loved those days with his big sister. So about a couple months after moving in with her boyfriend, she come by the house one day. She was dropped off to do some laundry. That same night, my wife and I had a charity event we were going through with a police and fire hockey game. Actually, it was in Kingston at the time. So my wife's making cookies and preparing for this charity event. My daughter's doing laundry, so we had an opportunity to sit and talk for a while. And this was a different Jillian that I'm talking to at this point. She was sad. She was unhappy, uncharacteristic of her, not like this. She was really down. She was struggling in this relationship with her new friend. And what I explained to her, and we had always had that open communication where we could talk about things. She used to ask me about guys, why are guys such jerks? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't answer that. It's how we are. But so I had said to my daughter, I says, life shouldn't be this hard at this young age. If you're having that kind of feeling, that it's a struggle, then you need to come home and break yourself away from that, take a break. She felt, well, it feels controlling. I don't get to see my friends as much. I want to start golfing with you again. And I said, okay. We made plans the following weekend to go out golfing. So other than being sad and unhappy, I really didn't see a red flag at the time right then and there. In hindsight, that was an attempt to reach out from her, and I questioned that conversation, goes over and over in my head. Should I have seen something different? Should I have tried something different? I just didn't see it that time. That night, I dropped her off at the house about 6 o'clock at night. I went on to the charity event with my wife. That night, we came home after the event about 3:45 in the morning. We're woken up, and my wife is standing at the bedroom window looking out and said, hey, the police are out front. This was unusual, of course. My wife is a police officer, and we just came from an event with a lot of police officers there, so we knew something happened. We didn't know what it was. Could it have been one of the officers that we were with that night, someone from the fire department? What could have happened? We just didn't know. So as we come down the stairs and open the door, very, hard thing to see when the door opens and you see those faces of the police chief, police captain, and another friend that we know very well, good friends of ours. And that look just says it all. 2 words, he just said, it's Jillian. And that's all it took. So from the shock of that night, I cannot explain the unbelievable impact that how could that happen? How could she get from the child that she was with us to the point where she would even think of trying a drug, not to mention a drug as hard as heroin. And the thought of her putting a needle in her arm, it just, to this day, I just cannot understand that. Again, good kid, good neighborhood, good family, and we struggled with this. So as we tried to put our lives back together, and we're still trying, we started to try and figure out what caused this. What was it? What was it for our daughter? And we come up with a common theme that influence, that voice that is stronger than our own voice, that from the time they're little, say no to drugs, say no, yes, mommy, yes, daddy, say no, that was all there. At some point when that guidance is away from us and they're no longer under our control, what kind of an influence with a voice that's stronger than our own takes over? How does that happen? And it's not, our kids don't wake up and decide they want to try a drug someday and go seek that dangerous drug dealer. It's somebody they know. It's somebody close to them, somebody that they trust, whose voice is louder than ours as parents that can influence them to try something else. This is the danger. Shortly after my daughter's passing, as we were actually waiting, there was a court event coming up with her boyfriend and so forth, which was really secondary to the rest of our lives, but during that time and when that was coming on, I was down at the restaurant where my daughter was working. And this is something that was really hard on me. But I was sitting in the restaurant, and there was a young girl sitting next to me talking to one of her friends. And she was telling the story. She knew my daughter, Jillian. She didn't know who I was. And she was telling this story, and I'm hearing this, that she knew Jillian was getting in trouble with drugs, had gotten into some serious drugs, but didn't want to say anything because she didn't want to get her in trouble. didn't want to rat her out, so to speak. That was hard to hear, and it made me realize, had I known and I had that opportunity, we would have moved heaven and earth to get her into a program and try and help her. We didn't know. So the message to any kids here and the parents to give to your kids, if they do know somebody that's on this path and in trouble, tell somebody. They don't have to tell their parents, but tell your own parents, tell somebody. Because once the kids get hooked, and once that hook is in them, they can't do it themselves. Once they try those serious drugs, they cannot break away. So at this point, my wife and I, our focus became the influence and what we can do to try and impact this influence. At the same time, the nonviolent drug offender thing was being talked about in Congress, and that was a hot topic. Sean Kelly from Channel 5 had done a report on this drug dealer that had spent some time in prison, and there was some sympathy for this drug dealer. Nonviolent person, didn't hurt anybody, but yet was selling drugs. Personally, I can't think of anything more violent than a child dying of a drug overdose, but it was seen differently. So we wrote a letter in response, my wife did, in hopes that Sean Kelly would have the flip side of that story and want to come into our home as he did the drug dealer's home and hear the impact of that nonviolent drug offender from the other side and so forth. And we didn't get a response, so we were trying to be heard. And that's what led us to meet Tom. A neighborhood, Rob and Celeste Jones, good friends of ours, were hosting a function at the house where Tom was talking about his platform. And so I had a chance to meet Tom and Amy. We were talking out on the back porch about our whole thought about the awareness. People just don't know how bad it is. So as we're talking about what's going on with drugs, there happened to be another person from the same neighborhood, a very nice neighborhood that we live in Plymouth, that had just recently lost a son to drug overdose. He was 24 years old, I think. Again, 2 kids, cul-de-sac neighborhood in West Plymouth, nice area, as Ryan had mentioned. It does not discriminate. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you are. It hits all of us. My wife and I feel we did the right thing with Jillian growing up. How can this happen? Her younger brother is still devastated. He couldn't come tonight. It would be too much on him. So anyway, that led us into a different direction, again, of this strong influence in the awareness that people need to have. Shortly after that, my wife found something that I thought was interesting, and let me share this with you for a second. This was written by one of our presidents. Narcotics addiction is a problem which afflicts both the body and soul of America. It comes quietly into our homes and destroys children. It moves into neighborhoods and breaks the fiber of community, which makes neighbors. We must try to better understand the confusion and disillusion and despair that bring people, particularly young people, to the use of dangerous drugs. That was written in 1971 by Richard Nixon. How far have we come? And I honestly believe in my heart that what needs to happen is awareness very much like this here. And I thank everybody here tonight, Tom and Amy, for reaching out to me. That conversation we had on Rob and Celeste's porch that night made an impact with them. They actually reached out and kind of chased me down to be part of this, and I appreciate that. It's hard to get a politician to chase after you, but he did, and I'm very glad. But he gave me a great opportunity because we had been trying to be heard. Not long ago, you heard about Molly in the news. It was mentioned here tonight. Do you remember what you did when you saw that in the news? You grabbed your kids, you had a talk with them. Have you heard about this? Do you know what this is? And those 2 young college students that had passed away, tragic, their families are forever destroyed. Well, that's what needs to happen, unfortunately, I think, every single night. We need to hear about that. Imagine Maria Stefanos on the news tonight saying, today we had 15 overdoses in Plymouth area, 2 deaths, and so forth. Get the awareness out there, because then everybody sees just how bad it is, because the numbers are huge. They're staggering. We mentioned some figures today, but they're actually staggering. More young people are dying of drug overdose than car accidents. It's the #1 cause of these young kids now, 18 to 25, I believe is the age group that I read. And the statistics are so contradicting when you read about it. And what that usually means, when the numbers are contradicting by a lot, that means the numbers are huge and they change so often that it's hard to get a grip on what the numbers actually are. But there's a lot of overdose going on. As you said, in our community, there's an epidemic. I would like to see that on the news. Personally, I think that's the start of the answer, because then the people that are not affected by these drugs are finally as outraged as the people that are. And that's another quote from our president years ago. That's what needs to happen. We all need to see that in the news, and maybe then that influence will change. Thank you.
Tom, I know I speak for everyone in this room. We're so grateful to you for sharing your story, and all of us will keep you and Michelle around for this. God bless you. The last two speakers today are Richard Miller and Robert Gallagher, principal and program director at Independence Academy, and Robert Gallagher, certified recovery counselor. So, Rich and Robert, you are the cleanup hitters.
Thank you. Thank you. Stories like this frustrate me. It frustrates me that I'm a principal of a recovery high school, that we shouldn't have those schools, but we do. I'd just like to get a show of hands for a second. And how many people have asked their child, what do you want to be when you grow up? How many of your children have said, I want to be an addict? It happens, and Mr. Gallagher and I are only two people who witness it every day. There are approximately 56,000 kids struggling with addiction in the state of Massachusetts. About 27,000 of them are diagnosed with either substance abuse or dependence. Mr. Gallagher and I are here today to talk about the reality of the fact that one day you may need to comprehend the fact that you may need to send your son or daughter to a treatment facility and eventually the potential of a recovery high school. There are 4 recovery high schools in the state of Massachusetts. Independence Academy is the 4th one, the newest one. We opened in 2011. We're funded through the Department of Public Health. There are 24 in the country, and what's unique about Massachusetts is that Massachusetts has political support, and that there is a law in the books that says any student diagnosed with substance abuse or dependence has a right to attend one of the 4 recovery schools in the state of Massachusetts, free of charge to the family. What are recovery schools? Recovery schools are schools that provide students who have already been diagnosed with substance use or dependence and have committed to sobriety. They have an opportunity to go to a school that is committed to giving them an education as well as committed to giving them a place where other students are also committed to recovery. A student said to us one time in a meeting, this is the way all schools should be. This isn't an alternative school. This is the way all schools should be, that everybody in the school is focused on staying clean and sober. The problem is that the students that we have already gone through months and years of addiction. With the students we have, or the students that go to recovery schools, are committed to changing their lives. And I'm going to turn it over to my recovery counselor, Mr. Gallagher. He's been working in the field for 20 years. He is going to talk about what types of interventions you can employ, or I'd like you to keep that in your mind. And when we have a question and answer period, please, maybe your child doesn't need a recovery school, or maybe people you know don't need a recovery school, but we're also a resource to the community, to the South Shore. Our goal is not only to work with the students who are struggling with addiction, but to get out to the communities and be the experts out there to help school districts and parents really with some of the stuff that was talked about today.
Thank you, Mr. Malolo. As I said, my name is Bob Gallagher. I'm a licensed social worker and also a recovery counselor for Independence Academy. The problem of substance abuse hits, as was said by several people, hits everybody. It's not just a Brockton problem. It's not just a downtown Boston, a Dorchester, a Mattapan problem. It's everywhere. Besides the kids that actually come to the school, I also am used as an outreach person for different school systems. I was talking to someone who attends Cohasset High School, and young man, and he said, "Why me?" Very valid question. My first response to that is, "Why not?" He didn't like hearing that when I first said it to him. My next question is, why'd you start? And he started, just like with other people have said before, he started with his grandmother's pain medication at the age of 14. He switched to harder medication. Then he switched because of the cost. Because where he was getting his stuff, oxys were $14 a pill. Heroin, for works and everything, was $4. Has no job, has to get high right away. But enough about that. I want to talk more about how to access treatment. On the South Shore, there is one program for detoxing kids. It's in Brockton. It's called the Castle. It's run by High Point. To take care of an area the size of from Braintree down to the Cape. One program.
How many beds?
14. So that's one issue, is accessibility and numbers. There are others throughout the state. There's Mare and Worcester, there's some others, and there's also hospital detoxes that will at least get them a couple of days safe and then go forward. Now, part of the problem with accessing programs are private insurance companies and knowledge bases. A lot of insurance companies, still to this day, even with everyone recognizing that substance abuse is an issue, don't cover it. I've had a conversation with one of our parents recently about having them take their son off their insurance in order to get him access to Mass Health, to get him into programs quicker. On private pay insurance, I won't say the name of the insurance company, but their initials are HP. He had to sit in an emergency room for 17 hours to get authorization to go in. Another peer had a relapse 2 months ago during the summer program. Mass Health. One phone call from me to his insurance, to the Mass Health person, and to the Castle, got them in within 1 hour of them asking for the help. I was kind of hoping that someone from the insurance world would be here so I can talk about that more, but I'd last till about 10 or 11 o'clock if I did that. So, the kids we have at Independence Academy come from good homes, as we talked about, and some come from homes with more supports that needed. They talk about why they started. They talk about the change in their lives. One thing Danny talked about when he talked about what to look for: know your kids, know who they hang with, and know their behavior patterns, both at home and outside the house, as much as you can. The obvious what to look for: the bloodshot eyes, the falling over. Anyone can pick up if someone reeks of booze. It's those subtle things that give it away. That's what, as Ms. Miller referred to one of the kids we talked about, other kids pick up on that quicker than we will. As much as I've been in the field for 18 years, almost actually 19 now. Their peers pick up on things a lot quicker than we will. And they're the ones at our school that come to me. Not as rats, not as snitches get stitches and all that stuff, but to be supportive of their peers. This one's struggling, how can we help them? Another way to access treatment is what's called Section 35. I don't know if anyone's done that. It's a civil commitment that you go to court. say, my son or daughter is struggling with substance issues. They get seen by a court therapist. Then it gets sent to the judge. A judge signs off on it. Section 35 gets up to 90 days of treatment. It used to be 30. Then you have all the studies that say it takes 90 days to change a commitment. It takes 90 days to change a habit. Do they always stay the full 90 days? No. But that's on there that it could be up to 90 days to try to get son and daughter clean. If nothing more, then they got a few weeks of you not worrying about them. A few weeks where they're not with their dealers. They're not with the people that's influencing them. Some of the courts that are more knowledgeable about Section 35s happen to be in Plymouth County. Plymouth and Brockton are fantastic in sectioning. I used to run the men's addiction treatment program for High Point. It's a men's 18 and over Section 35 program in Brockton. I ran it for 2 years. Quincy, Plymouth, Taunton, and Brockton by far did the most sectioning in the entire state. Because they want, instead of incarcerating, instead of locking someone up who has these issues, let's try to get them some treatment. Let's try to get them the help they really need. I'll close with one more thing. If you have anyone, son, daughter, nephew, niece, friend, neighbor, that you think may have these issues, or you just want to talk about warning signs or anything else, please call us. The materials are outside on the table. I can see anyone after this and give you my number, the number of the school. I want to thank everyone for having this forum. Thank you.
I saw a lot of hands for middle school students. One of the most powerful things that we do as a school is that we send our kids who are in recovery out to talk about their addiction. And I encourage parents of the middle school kids to talk to your principals, talk to the guidance counselors, invite us out, invite us and our students. Mr. Gallagher will come with a couple of students who are in recovery and tell them their story. It's a much more powerful way to hear the story of how it happens from somebody that's a lot closer to their age.
Richard, Robert, thank you very much for all you do. I want to ask all of you a question, then we're going to open it up for question and answers. Before I ask you the question, I want to thank all of you for being here. And I particularly want to thank members of the school committees from most of the 6 towns that I represent, selecting from many of the towns that I represent. Your leadership is needed now as much as ever, if not more than ever before, on this issue. So here's the question I'll ask as parents. And again, as many of the panelists have already said, we're preaching to the choir. You're the people that are here. I'll ask you this question. If your son or your daughter was stricken with a life-threatening illness like cancer, how would you attack them? We all know the answer to that. You get them into the best treatment facility in the country, whether it's Dana-Farber or wherever. You bring them in there every day of the week, if that's what it took. You lay in the bed next to them 24/7, if that's what it took. Unfortunately, when it comes to drugs, there's a stigma attached to it. I don't want anybody to know. I would encourage everyone, if you see even the slightest symptom, attack it like it's a melanoma on your cheek. There's no stigma attached to it. It's an illness. But for the grace of God, go any one of us. Attack it and let your community help you. So now here's my pitch. I filed legislation in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, House Bill 1821, I believe. It's to put in-school resource officers back in every school. What makes the front page news every day, right through to this week, are the intruders, the people that come through the front door. I call that an acute And then there's the chronic attack. It's the attack that is right around the corner in the best schools in our state. And then there are people like Dana who are standing there, who are staring down that enemy. And I'm not talking about the intruder, I'm talking about the drug dealer, I'm talking about the influence that drugs are having on this generation of kids. So I won't get into detail, I want to open this up to the panel, but 1821 would fund an in-school resource officer the same way we fund the Community Preservation Act. It takes an action at town meeting to fund money above and beyond 2.5 for the purpose of putting young, articulate police officers, men and women, in our schools to become friends with our kids, to become trusted leaders in the eyes of our children. So that kids at 10 years old are writing to those cops who want to be like them. We're talking about pennies above our tax rate. And if it saves one child, what an investment. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. I'll keep you posted at town meetings of 1821 and how it's moving. It's a slow process in the legislature, but it's a deliberative process. There's a lot of interest in it. I asked the selectmen, school committee members, and the 6 towns I represent, please look it up, understand what it is. I need your help in advocating for it if you support it. So with that, I'd like to reach out to you. And I know there's a stigma attached to this whole topic, so nobody wants to be the first one. So just so you know, we're planting 5 people in the room to ask questions if you don't. So please ask questions. Yes, sir. Speak loud. Now repeat the question.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. Unbelievable. The gentleman lost his daughter. My heart bleeds for you. I have 2 daughters myself. One is 5 and one is 9. There's the blood that goes to my veins, the air that I breathe. Without them, I'd be nothing. Ryan, I love the way you hit it. You hit it right square in the nose. You tell the way it is, what you do, and how real it is. Deanne, I believe his name is. Congratulations, 30 years of recovery. Do I need this? When I was growing up, when someone asked me what I wanted to be, I never said an addict, and I became one. I've been sober 7 years now, and by the grace of God, I've been to Matt C. I've spoken to Matt C. and I've spoken to Castle, and I see the kids in Castle that really are blind to reality, and that's what drugs and alcohol do to people. It blinds them. My advice to anybody, and I became an alcoholic at 10 years old and an addict at 17, and I quit. I have 28 years of abuse. What I can tell the parents of today is really just keep an eye on your kids and be honest with them, because I had 2 parents myself. One was a police officer in my hometown of Randolph, and my mother was home a lot, and they never spoke to me about anything. And I'm not faulting them for what happened to me. I'm not faulting them at all. It was my choices and my bad decisions, but I never had that guidance as a little boy. I never had the tutelage or any teachings of drugs or alcohol in the games of it. So, and when the things came to my school when I was a young boy, I didn't really pay any attention to them because I didn't really know anything about them. I wasn't taught in my home. And when I speak to schools, when I speak to high schools or middle schools now, I enforce that kids talk to their parents, open up, and tell them everything. And, if you know someone that you think has a problem, if you think that the conversation the gentleman had with the lost daughter, the kids next to her, if that kid just told the story before, the tragedy would have been prevented. It's all about opening up and talking and telling. It's not telling on anybody. It's telling them to save their lives. I look at this forum tonight, and I believe this tonight will save lives. If this program here tonight saved one life, it's done its purpose. But my advice to any parent out here today: just talk to your children. Just talk to them, open up to them. And, when I say we, and I mean alcoholics and addicts, we are the best hiders and best liars of our disease. We'll look you square in the face. And I can remember when I was 15 years old, 16 years old, telling my mother, no, I'm not drinking. Telling my father, no, I'm not doing drugs. And I had them right upstairs in my bedroom. They just trusted me, and they really, again, they didn't give me that tutelage that I really needed as a child. So again, I don't want to keep any more time, but my advice to parents, being a recovering addict, is just talk to your children. Tell other parents. If you're scared to tell the parents of another child, write them an honest letter. Get it out there. Just talk and talk and talk and open up. It could save lives.
Hi, Sergeant Munford. I police your town. I see your kids. I am exposed to these kids just like Sergeant Wells and Ryan Calter, and I make it a mission to speak with every child who's addicted that I have interaction with. If they broke a law, I want to talk to them. I want to talk to their parents, and I wanted to share some strategies that may help you and some of my observations. I don't have a cut and dry plan, but some things do work, and if we all share what works and has worked, maybe it'll give you more tools in your toolbox. I took some notes here, so I have to go through my hand. The thing about juveniles and drug use is it's a perfect storm. It's the worst time in life to get addicted to drugs, and there's a reason. We've all heard kids will be kids. For eternity, kids will be kids. Kids have always been kids, and there's a reason. Their frontal lobes are not developed. They're not developed until they're 23 years old. That impacts their reasoning, consequences, impulse control, decision making, and everything that goes along with that, anger issues in addition. These kids can't make decisions on their own, and we falsely believe they can, and we all love our kids, and they do well in school, and we think that they're going out there, they're great young adults. Well, I'm telling you they're not. And when they're with you, they're making these good decisions because you're hand-holding and the support is there. But when they're separate from you, they're at a loss. So we have to give them strategies, and we have to help them how to say no. So you tell your kids when you bring up the conversation, and I'm going to tell you what to say. You say, do you know kids in school? Have you seen drugs? Have you tried drugs? How do you say no? Because I guarantee they're going to say, I don't know what to say. And when they're put in that decision in front of their peers, that's when they make bad decisions because they're not capable. So you as the parent say, I'm going to give you a tool. When somebody says, will you try this drug? You tell them to blame it on you. You be the bad guy. No, my parents drug test me. I can't do that. That one little bit of relief for them. So when that question comes out, they already know how to answer it. Because when they don't know how to answer it, that's when bad things happen. They're put on the spot. They want to be adult. And that's what adults do. They do what they want. It's just like when they were the kids, if they had a bowl of M&Ms on the counter. They're going to eat every single one of them because they don't know to stop. They like it. And why not? They still have the same decision making. They still cannot stop that control. Things that I've seen, patterns that I see, and I ask the kids, how did this start? Well, one pattern that I see a lot is it starts with marijuana at the home parties. Then it goes to the pills. And then the pills get ground and they're snorted. And then the heroin is snorted. And then we're all thinking, how in the world did they put a needle in their arm? What made you do that? I didn't do it. The drug dealer did it. So this is a very common pattern that I see. So somebody else is waiting there, not only to sell it, but they're injecting these kids and starting it. So they didn't have to do it. But once they did it, the decision's made. That's what they're going to do from now on. So don't think, oh, my child would never put a needle in their arm. Well, they might never have done it had not that dealer who was going to take your child's money and his life or her life, that's where it came from. Talk to them about how to say no. When you put it in their mind, they're more comfortable how to do it. And think of the strategies yourself. Google it. I Google everything on the planet. I love it. How to say no to drugs. Put the words in their brain ahead of time. It's called when, then thinking. When this happens, then I'm going to do that. They'll be more prepared. We teach it in all kinds of strategies and training. Teach your kids. Train your kids. Present the solutions. Privacy. Your child has no right to privacy when it comes to their well-being, and you can be a parent, and I'm going to give you permission to be a parent. You will not have Facebook. You will not have Twitter. You will not, because I said so, and it's a safety issue. And if any parents ever had that book, The Runaway Bunny, You let them know, I don't care how far you run, I will run forever and I will never stop. Let them know that before the drugs. There's 3 stages of drug use that I see. I haven't read this is what I see. I see patterns. I recognize patterns. There's pre-drugs, and that's hopefully the middle school parents here. The kids haven't touched it. They haven't seen it. This is where you're talking to them. Hey, if you go to that party and you're giving them the solutions, problem solving, communication, in the meantime, you're constantly, don't do drugs, make good decisions to ad nauseum, because it's going to stick and stick and stick. Present it ahead of time. Then we have exposure to drugs. I'm sorry, yes. Exposure to drugs. They may use the drugs, and then you better be the parent, and you better step in and know that kids will lie to you. A kid will only tell you enough to make you think that you got the answer that you're looking for. I don't know how many kids tell their parents, yeah, I was on pills. No, it was heroin. So they'll tell you enough to get you off their back to stop that conversation. Get the drug tests. Don't believe them. And punish them. When you're in the exposure stage, take their life away. Take their car. Take their phone for extended periods, because that's all they know. They don't understand criminal behavior. They don't understand us. They don't understand when we say, oh, you're going to go to jail. They are in the immediate. They are in the now. Use punishment. You're the parent. And parent them. Take it all away. Take that social media away. Take that phone away. I can't tell you how many times, and I know the officers can attest to it, the parents are in the station with us after criminal behavior and the kids still want the phone, and I tell the parents, you have permission to take that. You have permission to take that for 6 months. Be the parent. Don't let them not allow you to be the parent. You step up and you do the right thing, and you can. Punish them. Show them, punish them. You know what? If they think you're going to give up, it's only going to last a week, and that's what we do. When you put your kids on punishment, know this, you're on punishment too, and that's the worst part about it. Think of it, timeouts, grounding, you had to stay in. It's even worse at this level. If they can't go out, you don't go out. And stick with it, because this is their life, and it's the most important thing that you can do to them.
This is the reason kids in Kingston don't want to be arrested. One last thing before we take another question, Susan, look up in Google, there's this great new store, it's called Staples, and they sell pads of paper around paper that prevents poisoning of you. Questions, please. Thank you, Susan.
Hi, Tom. I want to know, in your bill, would that include the D.A.R.E officers?
It actually is. It is a D.A.R.E officer.
Okay.
You know, right now, each town will, by the time we vote, will determine whether they have D.A.R.E officers or not.
Right. Right now, Halifax and Kingston do not.
Plympton does. When I was on the regional school committee, because of budget constraints, the D.A.R.E officer was done away with against my better wishes. So the bill does not try to recreate the wheel. It's reinstituting D.A.R.E officers. Thanks for asking. Another question? Anyone? Yes.
I have a question about the medical marijuana.
I think that's D.A. Cruz will handle that.
Are there going to be any of the dispensaries around our area? And is it going to? Do you think we're going to see a rise in the children?
D.A. Cruz, before you answer that, can you repeat the question into your microphone so the TV audience can hear it?
Sure. The question was medical marijuana, and are we going to see dispensaries in our area, and do I believe that will be a rise of kids using marijuana? You're speaking to somebody who worked hard against the decrim of less than 1 ounce of marijuana, and also medical marijuana, I think, if done correctly, is going to be a very effective tool for the people that need it, the cancer and the glaucoma people. Unfortunately, what I do is I just look across the country. I look at California, where they are right now. And basically, virtually, people are going out, they're getting licenses, they're getting cars in for stress. Marijuana is being distributed by these various agencies. And right now, if you read in your paper, all around our county and all around the state, there's a lot of individuals who are trying to get certain locations and licenses for those areas, because obviously it's going to be lucrative at some point. And the people that I talk to also believe, and I hope it doesn't happen, but I believe at some point there's going to be a push to legalize all marijuana here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. One thing you should know that is interesting is that although Massachusetts has decrimmed less than 1 ounce of marijuana for personal use, and although we do have a law that was passed on medical marijuana, the federal law, in federal law, it's still illegal to do anything with marijuana. So there's a dichotomy out there right now that I think a lot of these pharmaceutical companies or these agencies, these businesses they're putting together have to deal with the federal agencies right now, because if they were going to enforce that law, that would be a problem for them. So I think it's coming. I think that it's been passed, and the voters of Massachusetts have done that. I'm very concerned about the next step. Not the step where we are right now, but the next step when they take away the classifications of various forms of marijuana. As you've heard, there are different brands out there, there are different strengths out there, there's different levels of THC out there. Right now, the drug on the street that costs the most money is marijuana. Hydroponic marijuana is out there, and we've actually had drug rips on marijuana cases, which have resulted in homicides in our county alone. So to me, we've got a long road to go. I'm hopeful that it'll be done the right way, but unfortunately I've seen things go the wrong way.
Another question?
My question is, none of my kids have any type of social media. They don't have Facebook, Twitter, email, nothing. After listening to all of you and the opportunity to spy on them, so to speak, via the social media, it makes me question a bit as to which is the lesser of two evils, being in the dark or giving them the tools to be out in the world. Don't know if anybody has an opinion about that.
And I'm only going to speak from personal opinion. I do not have research on this. But I do believe that unlike when you would ground your child 20 years ago, let's say, and you send them to their room, or you say you're not going to this party because we know so-and-so is there and they're doing this, that, and the other thing, your child, when they're on social media, has access to every deviant behavior out there. And I do think being in the dark, as long as you can, is the best thing you possibly can do for your child. There is a website. It's called earwig.com. Look at it. It teaches your kids how to get high on everything out there. And it's a difficult dilemma, because when you keep your child in the dark, they feel like they're isolated. They don't know what's going on with their peers know what's happening. They don't. They feel frustrated. But then on the flip side, you have this access to really bad people. And that's the best way I can describe it.
I would just say the internet is a great educational thing if it's monitored, especially with our kids. Facebook, you're not supposed to go on until you're 13. Nobody's really monitoring that. To me, quite honestly, I think that what we see quite often is a lot of the people that are out there trying to groom our kids and trying to get information from our kids. Facebook is putting information out there. People are going on looking at Facebook, trying to develop conversations with our children. And lots of times kids will go to chat rooms thinking they're talking to another 12, 13-year-old kid. In actuality, what we've actually done undercover stings whereby we've had deputy sheriffs and also police officers talking to somebody. They think what they'll do is they'll go into an adult chat room and they'll start talking and they'll pretend they're a 13-year-old girl. And what you'll see is virtually 80 to 90% of those people that are on that chat room will get away from that kid. They want nothing to do with that kid. Another 10% or so will really focus in on that child and start asking incredibly graphic questions immediately. So that's another whole world, I think, on top of the drug stuff. The internet really opens up for our kids. So like the sergeant said, if your kids have phones and things such as that, take away their phones at night. Don't let them go to bed with their phones. If you walk into your room, some kids will have their phones going all night long, talking all night long. And what we have with some problems in schools, kids, used to be you get into a fight with a kid at school, maybe over the Christmas break, you'd forget about it. Now when the kids go home, the cyberbullying is incredible. And you're never away from the problems that exist. 24/7, immediate access, and that's what our kids have, unfortunately, these days. They have access to everything immediately, and they react without thinking lots of times, and some things can happen. So I guess what I would say is be very careful with that stuff. It's a great tool, but monitor it while they're young, and make sure that, as the sergeant said, you're the parent, take away their phone, punish them with that phone. You have no bigger punishment than taking away a kid's phone. When I spoke at this school, probably a couple years ago, Internet Safety, I asked the kids, how many of you kids have a phone? Virtually every hand went up. And then I asked them, how many of you kids have camera capabilities on your phone? Same thing. Virtually every hand went up. I don't think they make phones anymore without cameras, to tell you the truth. And these kids have access to that stuff. So it's a whole incredible challenge that our kids have nowadays in that whole internet world. And I could talk for a long time, but I'm not going to. So thank you.
You know, one comment as a parent about that, you got to remember something. Never father offers advice. You're in a race with society to fill up the whiteboard. What social media does for our children is give the bad guys steroids. They're supercharged. They've got a tool to compete against you that you don't have. So I would agree with these panelists. Monitor it very, very closely. How about one more question? Yes, please. Or as many as you'd like.
Can any of the panelists tell me about spice and if that is detectable in an over-the-counter drug kit?
Would like to handle that. The question is about spice. Is it detectable?
Bob, you can take this, Mike.
Spice and all those drugs in those convenience stores that you can purchase in some towns, they're not, the way that they're able to sell them is that they're not made for human consumption. If you look in those bags, they're either talking about insects, they're talking about growing plants, plant food, things such as that. And therefore, it's not approved by the FDA. And so when you see that being sold, it says right on it, not for human consumption. So kids are using that stuff, unfortunately, for synthetic marijuana, whether it be K2, whether it be spice, or whether it be synthetic cocaine or synthetic heroin, the dragonfly, all that stuff that's out there, incredibly dangerous. Whether or not that can be drug tested, it would be like testing, I think, for kerosene. I think it's just terrible stuff in your body. It's incredibly bad. And as a matter of fact, we need, here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if we can't get a law passed quickly, what we should do is we should reach out to our selectmen and try to prevent those items being sold in our local convenience stores, wherever they may be, because kids think when they walk in there, hey, I'm buying it, right? How bad can it be? And then they're taking it and they're using it, and it's really bad stuff. We've had a lot of bad experiences with that.
Two recent, if I can just touch base on that as well. We've had two recent kids whose drug of choice was spice. And to answer your question, over the counter, there isn't anything that tests for it. But if you send it to different labs, like we use Quest, and they have developed their own test for it, but you have to send it out. And it's so individualized, the reactions that kids have to it, and it's dangerous as anything. Because the packets themselves will have what they say are the ingredients inside, and then I'll get a report from the lab that those are the ingredients. So there's also that issue too.
Yes, any questions? Yes, sir. Paul.
I was kind of shocked to hear the hookah mentioned. Are you guys seeing that as a segue at all into drug activity?
Paul, I'm going to ask you to repeat it one more time, just so the people at home can hear it.
Tom, you need to repeat it into your microphone.
You can hear it through that.
Oh, very good.
I was saying I was kind of shocked to hear that someone had mentioned the hookah, and I know it's become a kind of a big rage, and a lot of the kids are saying, hey, it's better to do this than to be doing drugs. Are you guys seeing the hookah as any kind of a segue into a drug activity?
I think that what we need to be concerned about is the risk-taking around that, and in the same way that other substances are not controlled and you don't know the amount and the type, that there is that particular issue. There also, because of the fact that it's being smoked in a pipe with water, there is all of this sharing and bacteria involved in that. So there's that particular issue, but I think that really kind of that risk-taking is definitely an issue. I think that there's been a real public awareness around nicotine dependence and cigarette smoking, and that kids see that as a safer way. And again, that risk-taking behavior that then leads to other risk-taking behavior. Oh, that really wasn't so bad. And the whole social environment around the hookah is an issue as well. So in certain communities, we've seen that.
Other questions? Yes.
I wanted to ask a few questions more about the intervention aspect of it, just because, I mean, I'm in the younger side, and I'm seeing a lot of my peers.
If you wouldn't mind
Sorry.
speaking to his-
I'm seeing a lot of my peers between the ages of 30 and 40 in the addictive, not under parents' control. Obviously, you said something about kids coming up to you and talk about their parents, but also their peers themselves. You said the Section 35, which a parent can do to a child, but if you have something where a child, obviously not a child, but an adult, is an addict and they're struggling and, they push people away, there's not much they can do. I mean, I've heard of so many people just in the last 2 weeks in this general vicinity that have overdosed, and there was so many people that tried to reach out and tried to do stuff for them, but it just seems like there really isn't a lot of avenues to really get, unless you have them, arrested. I don't know what you would do. It seems to be a very big ordeal because, like I said, the reach out process it doesn't seem like there's a lot of avenues to go. Like you said, there's only one place in Brockton.
For the adolescents. I have. I can walk. I can talk loud up the microphone. Great question. We actually have a young lady who actually sectioned her father that I work with outside of the school environment. She's 17 and went through the whole process and actually got her 42-year-old father sectioned. So that's never, if we're not just a parent or spouse, the kids can actually do it too. So that's one thing. Accessibility and how you go about doing it. There's court-mandated things. There's other things you can do. Problem is, with further than just detoxes, a person has to agree to it. For further treatment, whether it's to a 6-month halfway house or to a private pay program, after you turn a certain age, you have to agree to go to it. And addicts aren't always in the space where agreement is what they're best at. So it's just a matter of each person just trying your best each day. I wish there was one answer that solved it all. I would have retired years ago if there was. But that's a great question, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just real quick, I can't get a cell phone sitting on here. I have no idea what hookah is. And I don't know about the computer. Does someone tell us what that is?
I know I can't. You can tell us what hookah is.
It's like a water pipe. It's a big, which you can smoke nicotine through it. It's got water in it. It's kind of like a legalized bong, I guess, for lack of a better word. A bong is a device that's used to smoke marijuana, but the hookah normally is not used. It's for tobacco, not for marijuana. Although it can be used either way, but it's a big device, probably tall up, which you smoke in, you blow, and you smoke out of it.
So they just get addicted to the nicotine? Is that what it's all about?
What they put in it.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may just elaborate on that for 1 second. We don't, in this area in particular, I think you're referencing maybe like hookah bars and things of that nature. On the South Shore, I'm not even aware of any. But I can speak to the behavior of the hookah. Is there really?
In Plymouth.
All right.
Plymouth Center.
Well, it makes my point even more valid then. Of course, if you put nicotine in there, it's going to be addictive. But I think the other property that's addictive is the behavior of the hookah. So you're actually smoking something, inhaling something. It's developed by a water bong type material, and it's similar to what you would smoke with marijuana. It's the behavior. It's the same exact behavior as if you place marijuana inside of it. So I don't know if that clarifies at all. I think it's mostly, of course, there's a chemical aspect of it that is an addictive property, but I think that the behavior of what you're actually doing is addictive as well.
So it's basically the gateway to the stepping stone to smoking marijuana out of a bong.
I believe so, and make no mistake about it. if you ask anyone that smokes marijuana, they're going to tell you that it's not addictive. They're going to tell you that there's no addictive properties at all. Marijuana it absolutely is addictive. It's a poison. It's a poison. And if we're going to use a hookah to mimic the way we would smoke marijuana, then I'm telling you right now, it has detrimental effects.
Thank you. Another question back there?
Can you just go over what spice is? Because I don't even know what that is.
Asking again what spice is.
Well, you have to actually read the, like we said, you have to read the content label, what it is, but it's supposedly, it could be sold as incense, potpourri, but you'll see it if you go to a gas station or a convenience store, usually behind the counter. It's relatively, could be anywhere from $10 to $15 for a bag of it, and kids are taking that and they're just rolling it and smoking it.
Now, I know that one of the questions coming, what inning is it? So, we're going to wrap up soon. Before we have another question, I want everybody to, this tape that we have that was produced by Department of Public Health in collaboration with Dr. Comfort. It's called Strengthening Family Programs. Amy has got 6 copies of this and had it placed in the library in the 6 towns I represent. So you can go to the libraries, you can take this out. I strongly recommend you take out the video, you watch it, you turn to the library so others can, and we're going to get more from the other surrounding towns as well. So how about one more question? Yes.
What is the predominant drug in this area, and where is it coming from?
The question was, what's the most predominant drug in the area and where does it come from?
I hear a parallel. Yeah, well, I would say it is heroin right now, only because it's so cheap. Like they said, it's in the pills, the oxycodone, the oxycontin. A lot of those are coming from Florida. They're coming from out of state, and people are going down and picking them up. People are able to get doctors down in Florida. They bring back large quantities of them stashed, and but I would say. When we talked about an opiate epidemic earlier, what I see down the court, like I said, I'm down there 3 or 4 days a week. It's either heroin or it's the pills. And it's coming from out of state.
But alcohol is still the substance that's abused the most.
Another question, yes. Here's the microphone.
Just a follow-up to your comment about being down at the court 3 to 4 times a week and so forth. When you're seeing these cases and the predominance of these drugs, is it mostly adults? Is it the kids that you're seeing? Like, what's the majority?
I would say it started around, for the most part, 18 years old. What happens is these people that are addicted to drugs, this is my opinion, I don't look at them as criminals. I look at them as drug addicts, and I don't look at them as necessarily being bad people in the least bit. They're just addicted to drugs. And what happens is, and I know this point blank, I see it every single day. In order to feed a habit, these kids are going to steal. When I say kids, it can be anywhere from 17, 18, all the way up until their 20s. They're going to steal from people closest to them because, again, they're not criminals. They're just drug addicts. And once they exasperate, that's probably not the right word I'm looking for, but once they steal from everyone that they're closest to, they end up going out. And a lot of times they're stealing from people in their own family that those people don't even know they're stealing from. Grandparents, it's awful. And what happens is we catch so many of these people because they're not criminals. They go and they pawn it off to these different pawn shops, and we have real strict regulations in Kingston that any of these jewelers, they have to check in with us all the time. So they send us stuff. We go up and we look at the books all the time. And, people are turning in $5,000 Rolex watches for $100. And that's just how desperate they are. So getting back to your question, not to drift off too bad, but yeah, it's mostly anywhere from 18 to 28 years old is what I'm seeing down there, and it's awful.
I was just going to say, but I agree that drug addiction is a terrible thing. But once they break into your house and they break into your car, they're also criminals, and they need to be dealt with accordingly to make sure that stops. Because at some point they cross the line, and there's many people that have had obviously children that have gone down that path from oxys. They hurt their back, they get pain medication, then maybe they go on oxys, then they're buying oxys for a while, then they can't afford the oxys anymore, and then the next thing you know, they're doing heroin. And they do steal from their parents, and they do steal from their brothers and their sisters, but soon they're breaking into other people's homes and other people's cars, and that's when they've crossed the line, and they've got to be treated, I think, effectively to make sure that we're all safe, because we need to make sure that desperate people do desperate things, including hurt you.
Well, folks, we promised we'd have you out of here by 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock. I would invite you, should you need to reach any of the people on this panel, if you don't have their contact information, contact my office, and we'll tell you how to reach out to them and have a conversation. So thank you for coming. Great job.